Nazism, or National Socialism, was the ideology of Hitler's Nazi Party, which ruled Germany from 1933 to 1945. It grew out of the chaos after World War I, when people were angry about the Treaty of Versailles, economic struggles, and political instability. The Nazis pushed extreme nationalism, authoritarian rule, and a strong centralized government under the total control of the Führer. The party wanted to bring Germany back to power by rejecting democracy, building up the military, and expanding its territory. Propaganda was key to gaining support, portraying the Nazis as Germany's saviors. They introduced policies to boost the economy, create jobs, and secretly rebuild the military, even though it violated the Versailles Treaty. Nazism's drive for expansion led to World War II in 1939. Starting with Germany's invasion of Poland, the Nazis aimed to dominate Europe through military conquests. While they made big gains at first, their aggressive plans and poor management eventually caused Germany's defeat in 1945, leaving the country in ruins and divided. Esoteric Nazism. Esoteric Nazism is basically a mix of Nazi ideology with mystical and occult ideas. It tries to connect the Nazis' beliefs about race and politics with myths, ancient traditions, and spiritual concepts, creating a more symbolic and cosmic version of their ideas. At the heart of this is the belief that the Aryan race has some kind of mystical or divine origin, often tied to lost ancient civilizations like Atlantis or Hyperborea. Supporters of these ideas thought Aryans were meant to lead humanity, and that their purity needed to be protected. Symbols like the swastika, borrowed from ancient cultures, were given new meaning as signs of cosmic power and order. Esoteric Nazism also delved into things like the occult, astrology, and secret societies, blending myths and pseudoscience to back up its ideas. People like Heinrich Himmler and the Nazi group Ahnenerbe even looked into archaeology and mythology to try to prove these theories. Some versions even suggest that Nazi leaders were part of a secret spiritual war or influenced by mystical forces. STRASSERISM. STRASSERISM is a spin-off of Nazism that mixed nationalist and authoritarian ideas with a focus on socialism. Named after Gregor and Otto Strasser, it popped up in the early days of the Nazi Party and aimed for a more anti-capitalist approach, unlike the version of Nazism that worked with big businesses and industrialists. Strasserism called for a strong, centralized government, but wanted to redistribute wealth, nationalize industries, and support the working class. It also focused on rural development, prioritizing farmers and small businesses over city elites and corporations. Basically, it was about smashing capitalism to promote national unity. Gregor Strasser was one of the main figures pushing these ideas in the Nazi Party, but he butted heads with Hitler. Hitler didn't want to alienate wealthy conservatives and capitalists who could help him gain power, so he sidelined Strasser's socialist ideas. Things came to a head during the Night of the Long Knives in 1934, when Hitler had Strasser and his supporters purged, ending Strasserism's influence in the party. Neo-Nazism. Neo-Nazism is basically a modern-day attempt to bring back the ideas and practices of Nazism after World War II. It popped up after the Nazi regime fell in 1945, with supporters trying to update National Socialism's core ideas, like extreme nationalism, authoritarianism, and militarism for today's world. Neo-Nazis push for a centralized, authoritarian government and claim to fight for their cultural identity while opposing things like liberal democracy, globalization, and multiculturalism. They often use Nazi symbols and slogans to promote their beliefs and rally like-minded people. Some see themselves as defenders of their heritage, framing their ideology as a reaction to modern social and economic changes. Different neo-Nazi groups have different goals. Some try to get into politics to gain legitimacy, while others stay on the fringes, focusing on protests or propaganda. These groups are usually part of broader far-right or ultranationalist movements. National Bolshevism. National Bolshevism, or Nazbol, is a political mashup of far-left socialism and far-right nationalism. It mixes Marxist-Leninist ideas like economic collectivism with strong nationalist principles, pushing for a centralized state and cultural or national unity. The idea started in early 20th century Russia with people like Nikolai Ustryalov, who thought the Soviet Union's communist revolution could also revive Russian nationalism. Nazbols were against Western capitalism, liberalism, and individualism, seeing them as threats to national identity. Instead, they wanted a state-controlled economy and a society unified by culture or ethnicity. In the 1990s, after the Soviet Union fell, National Bolshevism resurfaced with the National Bolshevik Party, led by Eduard Limonov and Alexander Dugin. This modern version mixed anti-capitalism with ideas like Russian expansion and resisting Western influence. The party's flag, a red background with a black hammer and sickle in a white circle, symbolized its blend of communist and nationalist imagery. Christian Nazism. Christian Nazism is an attempt to mix Christianity with Nazi beliefs, blending religion with the ideas of nationalism and racial purity. It wasn't an official movement, but popped up in some places, especially during Nazi Germany. The idea was to connect Christian identity with Nazi ideals, claiming that Christian values fit with the nationalist and authoritarian goals of the regime. Supporters of this ideology tried to reinterpret Christianity to match Nazi views. For example, they emphasized Jesus as a figure who supported their ideas of Aryan superiority while rejecting Christianity's Jewish roots. Some groups, like the German Christians, tried to Nazify Christianity by removing Jewish influences from the Bible and promoting a version of Christianity that aligned with Nazi policies. Islamic Nazism. Islamic Nazism is when some groups or individuals try to mix Nazi-inspired ideas with certain interpretations of Islam, focusing on things like extreme nationalism and anti-Jewish, usually twist texts out of context to back up their ideas and motives. Historically, this term is often linked to Amin al-Husseini, the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem during World War II. He collaborated with Nazi Germany, supporting their anti-Jewish policies and sharing their opposition to Zionism. He also opposed British and Western colonial powers in the Middle East and even helped recruit Muslims to fight for the Nazis in certain areas. The ideology usually centers on extreme nationalism and anti-Jewish propaganda, often paired with a resistance to Western influence. National Syndicalism. National Syndicalism was a mix of nationalism and socialist-style labor ideas. It envisioned a system where workers and employers would run industries together under strict state supervision to ensure everyone was working for the good of the nation. This corporatist approach was popular in Italy and Spain, where it supported the broader goals of fascism by blending social unity with state control. European Fascism. European fascism kicked off in the early 20th century, focusing on extreme nationalism and rejecting democracy. Big examples are Mussolini in Italy and the Austrian painter in Germany, who used propaganda, violence, and control to stay in power. The rise of fascism was fueled by economic problems and fear of communism spreading across Europe during the interwar period.